All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to Leverage Lab's second webinar in our monthly Publisher C-Suite webinar series. I'm Jake Hunley. I'm returning as your moderator for this event. And for the hosts of this series, we have our very own CEO, Anne-Marie Wills, who brings over 20 years of experience in the media industry, and John French, who has served in top positions of leading media companies such as Penton Media. Today, they'll be discussing the cookie apocalypse and what the deprecation of third-party cookies means for media and publishing companies. They'll cover why third-party cookies are going away, when it will happen, and what that means for your bottom line. During the webinar, I do encourage you all to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens. I'll stick around in the background to answer any questions during the webinar or let Anne-Marie and John answer them at the end. With that being said, let's get started.
Sounds good. Welcome, everyone. Again, as Jake mentioned, thanks for coming back. And if you were not at the first one, we welcome you to the second in the series of 6. Just a couple of notes around that first one. Fortunately, it was very well received. It was one of the few webinars that I've been a part of that everyone hung on to the very end, which probably is more Anne-Marie than me, but it was a good sign. We appreciate the interest. And this one in particular, talking about third-party cookies and stuff, I mean, we know what third-party cookies are, most of us, but do we really know the guts of it and why that's going to drive change to go to first-party data only? And I got to tell you, as we were going through this and putting this webinar together, and some of the research that Anne-Marie has discovered, it's really illuminating that how the privacy issues have become such a huge deal. And we'll talk about this and why. I'm a bit surprised, frankly, that government regulatory issues agencies haven't shut this down earlier, as they had done in the UK and the European Union. So that being number one. Number two, we hope you come away with a lot of knowledge, but not so much understanding what it is, but more importantly, what the future holds and how it's going to affect your media company. And then the third, Leverage Lab having been now not always been based in Kansas City, you'll see a sprinkling of a theme around Taylor Swift and Taylor Swift. I learned a couple of things. I learned things about third-party data that I never knew before. I also learned more about Taylor Swift in the last 30 days than I've ever had in my life. And there's a lot of Taylor in this presentation, but it's meant to be fun as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Anne-Marie. I'll be back and forth as we did the last time, and let her open it up, the agenda, and then we'll get going. And the promises, we said, we'll do this in 30 minutes to just respect your time and fill as much information as possible. So with that, Anne-Marie.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So really quickly, for those of you who don't know who we are, Leverage Lab, we are a revenue partner to B2B and B2C media. We are 100% focused on leveraging your rich audience data to drive new revenue opportunities. We work with a host of publishers. We bring a full solution. We bring data infrastructure, preconceived campaign programs. We bring the production capability, analytics and reporting, sales enablement and training. We're here to be a true partner in driving new revenue growth. So that's what we're doing. And I wanted to give you just a tiny bit of background so you kind of know where we're coming from. A lot of what we're going to talk about today really comes from our day-to-day practice and working with publishers. So let's get into it. So got to do just a little bit of a retrospective and make sure everybody's on the same page about what cookies are, where they came from, what they do. We're also, like John said, with our tongue firmly planted in our cheek, we're going to give a little bit of history about the third-party cookie and align it to our favorite pop star's career, and look at the third-party cookie through its eras, its different eras phase. We'll talk about the impact on marketers, and it's significant. And this is probably the most important part of this webinar, is really helping you understand when you're standing in the seat of sitting in the seat of your marketing partners, really what they're contending with. And then lastly, what does it mean for media? What's the opportunity? Where's it at? We'll cover it all today. So I'm going to talk about the cookie in this context. Every time we see anything to do with third-party cookies and the imagery related to it's always a chocolate chip cookie. And I want to really challenge everybody to think about the third-party cookie, any cookie, technology-based cookie, as a fortune cookie, because it's a much better analogy. Let me explain why. And I have nothing against chocolate chip cookies, absolutely true. So how do cookies work? It's really very simple. When you open a browser, when you get on your device and you navigate to the web, and let's say you go to a specific website, as you move to that website, as you type in the name of that URL into the browser, there's a request that is sent to a server. On that server is the information that you're requesting about that web page. So as that's transmitted back to your browser, along with it comes a very small piece of code. And inside of that piece of code is an identifying, a unique identifier for you, for your browser, for your device. It is the thing that is uniquely identifying who you are to the web server that you called. So that's why I think we should really think about the cookie as a fortune cookie, because it's a delivery conveyance. It is delivering an identity that is now going to be how you are identified to that specific website. So as that page loads, that cookie is also loading and placed in your local storage. So it is literally sitting on your device, sitting in your web browser. It is that thing that uniquely identifies you. So as we think about cookies, the original intent for cookies is a really admirable intent. They were really meant to be something that gives a better user experience to the person that's, navigating the web. It does things like help us stay logged in, provide user authentication. It's something that keeps things in our shopping cart so that when we come back, they're still there. For the people who own the websites being visited, who are depositing this first-party cookie, it's really a tool to help them better understand what's happening when people are using their website. How do users, think and move about and look at their products? It's really meant to be an insight-driving tool, something that gives them behavioral insight. But the problem is that the idea of the cookie was co-opted by the advertising industry. And that's where the third-party cookie is really the thing that is sucking up all the oxygen in the room these days. So what's different about a first-party cookie versus a third-party cookie? Well, it kind of lies in the name. A first-party cookie is a one-to-one relationship. It's me navigating to a site I want to do business with or consume content from, and us having an exchange of information. Third-party cookie is third parties are involved. So again, we've got our user navigating to a website they want to visit. While they're there, though, those fortune cookies with those special identifiers inside of them are also coming along for the ride. And these cookies belong to people that we may not, in the original use of the third-party cookie, have even given consent to. So things like ad networks, social media platforms. And one thing that I want to kind of poke at a little bit here are the audience targeting vendors. So these, I think, are some of the most can I use the word insidious, but some of the most misused kind of data use around third-party cookies. Audience targeting are essentially pools of cookies that are brought together and sort of interpreted in terms of their behavior and assigned some sort of segmentation to them. Essentially, vendors out there are looking at behaviors that people use across the web and then making assumptions about what their intent is. And then they offer those audience segments in an open marketplace where marketers can consume them. This has been the predominant practice for a lot of marketers in terms of how they identify the audiences that they want to target. Down here at the bottom of this page, we've got a web address, and I really encourage you to go check it out. This web address will take you to Oracle's Data Cloud, which is essentially a place where you can input a piece of identifying information like your email address, and it will spit back to you all of the details that are being sold that tie back to your identity. So all these different audience segments that you belong to and are being sold to marketers. Now, I want to kind of show you this because it's kind of a big aha for a lot of people. So let me show you my registry. The very top of this first page really tells the story. Oracle Advertising is helping advertisers connect to consumers online who may be interested in their products and services. That's what the intent here is. And this document is providing all the different interest segments that Oracle Advertising and their partners have associated to me, to my cookie, my device, my browser. I downloaded this on Valentine's Day, so it's very fresh. As you can see, if you look up here, there's 151 pages of audience segments that I belong to. I counted them. It's about 5,000. And it's kind of, like I said, it's a little bit mind-boggling to think that this is such a common practice. This is such the common way for marketers and brands to sort of identify their audiences. Now, kind of getting back to our story here, I want to show you some very specific outtakes from my profile. Let me start
here. This is
here.
incredible. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Anne Marie, you used the word insidious. Oh yeah, it's insidious. And unfortunately, it's also highly inaccurate.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Take a look at this. Like, it blew my mind. Parents of infants. Absolutely not. Parents of tweens and teenagers. Nope. Don't have an elderly parent in my house. The female head of household. That's a debate that my husband and I have, but that's not for here. As far as my generational, like where I belong generationally, I am a baby boomer, a Gen X, and a millennial. I speak Chinese.
Pretty good.
Pretty amazing, right? So, I mean, just in general terms, pretty much everything in this profile is incorrect. It doesn't just live with my, one more here. So this is talking about my age. This is a different vendor, 33 across. This particular vendor has identified me as 60 plus. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but that's not it. Now, it doesn't just relate to me as a person, it relates to my business as well. So they are identifying me based on my business. They're telling me that I'm in a 10 to $50 million revenue category. My investors would be thrilled to know this. And also, that I'm both a micro, a small, and a medium small business. So, as you can see, this is very prolific with misinformation. And this is, essentially all pretty much fed off of third-party cookie infrastructure. As third-party cookies deprecate, this will continue to degrade and fundamentally evaporate. So that leaves marketers kind of in a challenging place. So I promised you that we were going to talk about the history of the third-party cookie in the context of Taylor Swift's career. It just was too perfectly aligned to not do it. So the early stages of third-party cookie era, everybody loved it. Marketers loved third-party cookies, the ecosystem that they had to use to make their job simpler and easier. It was so robust and so built on the third-party cookie. Attribution, understanding of how people moved about the web, being able to address people anonymously across the web. I mean, all of these things were powered by the third-party cookie. And for a very long time, this was the de facto standard. I mean, John, you remember these days in the context of B2B media and how much pressure we had around programmatic.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, and by the way, for anyone who's thinking about it, these are albums of Taylor Swift. Yes, I knew about 1989. I don't think there's anybody living in the country that didn't, but I didn't know about Speak Now and Reputation. I'll just leave it at that. If you look what on Speak Now, that era, that really began coming out of the print era and going into more digital and finding influences on a digital platform. And I go way back just for a second in the print world, and those of us who've been around long enough, we had things like BPA statements, right? And even back then, I never really believed, and they were directionally accurate, if anything. And then when we saw the new promised land that we could then go to digital, and we can actually find individuals, and we can get begin to build a persona around that. And when I realized that we were so far away from that, even though we thought we were close, because so much more technology advance had to happen, and and that's all part of audience development as opposed to what used to be circulation. So there was tremendous pressure to do that. But I think about into the reputation era, for those of us in B2B, B2C, I work in B2C, as does Leverage Lab and consumer. What would our world look like today if we couldn't use third-party cookies? And how is it? Isn't it interesting? It was the salvation many years ago, and as you know, then it kind of morphed into, well, there's privacy issues, into now. I don't know if it has been proven, but certainly in my case, consumer behavior has changed, where I'm not going to click on anything as I'm surveying, whether it be personally or professionally, because in the back of my head, I know this is going to go somewhere and I'm going to get avalanched with all this stuff that I don't want. And I think that's going to be probably the biggest upside to the user post cookie, where I actually believe the belief in the integrity of talking to a vendor is going to go up from those vendors who don't use this stuff. So more about that later.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so you bring us to the reputation era, and this is where fundamentally the third-party cookie starts to fall apart because of consumer pressure. You know, consumers want choice. They want to be able to know when their data is being monetized. They want to have the ability to consent to things. And that wasn't the case with third-party cookies. And the EU was the first to come in and say, this is unacceptable. And that gave rise to cookie banners and consent management. And during this period of time, Firefox and Safari, who were two really important browsers, but still only, you know, a certain percentage of browser units, paled in comparison to the number of browser sessions that were happening in Chrome. But they said, no, we're not playing these games. We are not allowing third-party cookies. And they made that decision in 2013. So, you know, Chrome has now been the outlier. They've been the ones who have, you know, endured a lot of legal challenge. Even the technology and the hardware, you know, Apple has said, yeah, in 2017 and 2021, we're going to give users the ability to consent to these sorts of things. We just aren't going to let this happen without them approving it. So, you know, Google finally came under pressure and said, look, we're going to end it. And they came out with a date, and then they retracted that date, and then they came out with another one and retracted that. But we're now on our next era of third-party cookies, which is the you know, let's just shake it off. Let's get rid of it. To coin Taylor.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So as we go into this new era of the third-party cookie, you know, Google has made their first step. They have taken the first step, and on January 4th of this year, they actually deprecated cookies for about 1% of their users. I know that sounds like not much, but in the world of Google Chrome and all of the users globally that use that platform, it was 32 million users that suddenly were not able to have third-party cookies pass through their browser. And Google and Meta themselves are both saying, look, first-party data is the solution here, people. You know, you using your own data to identify your customers, to connect with them and find them, address them across the web is really the powerful thing here. And we're going to continue to support that no matter what. It's privacy compliant, and it puts all the onus on the data owner, you know, on the brand, on the media company. So fundamentally, it you know, releases a lot of pressure from them. So the impacts are starting to roll in. This 1% of you know, folks who have deprecated cookies, they're just now starting to see what it means, and so are the companies that are trying to market to them. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how are marketers impacted. Fundamentally, I think this is the big story here. This is saying that 8% of marketers are fully prepared. They characterize themselves as fully prepared for post-cookie world. And 22% are saying that they're mostly prepared. I mean, what this doesn't say is the vast majority of the marketers are not prepared.
And also, what I've seen in times of stress and in times of change and impactful things like this, it offers opportunity for people in media like us. By the way, just to be clear, this 8% and then the 22%, those are the people that we sell to. Those are the people who want to use our platforms to sell their product or what a service or whatever it may be. And they are saying 9 out of 10 are saying they're fully prepared. Well, first of all, I'm not sure if they really understand what that means, but secondly, assume for a second they are, and that means 9 out of 10 somewhere on the scale are not prepared. And we believe they're going to turn more and more to media. And if we've upped our game, then that's a tremendous opportunity. And we're in their ecosystem deeper than we've been probably in decades.
Yeah, 100%. I think the other thing that's really important about this statistic is that this is across a full spectrum of companies, from the largest of the large spending hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising every year down to small companies. So if you were to look at this and skew according to the size of the business, it would skew much more toward the large enterprises. We've worked with very large brands who have invested over years to prepare for
Great point.
future. So, small and medium-sized businesses are going to be very unprepared for this time. So let's talk about the solutions. Like John just said, this is a great opportunity for us. And this next table is really telling us that when you look at what the solutions are that are holding the most promise for replacing this cookie-dependent world, for advertisers and for publishers, it's basically the same thing. It's your first-party data. On the advertiser side, it's about getting, the advertiser bringing their first-party data together in a way about their customers so that they can speak to them in channels across the web. For publishers, it's about bringing together the data of our users and our constituent audiences in a meaningful way so that we can activate that wherever we choose to activate it, on behalf of our advertisers or on behalf of ourselves as we do audience development. So a couple more things I want to point out about this particular table. The social media advertising and targeting is a really high important, solution to both publishers and advertisers. And that is because with first-party data, you have full addressability in any social platform. You can take your audiences of data, you can take them to those platforms, you can encrypt your data so that it's not fully disclosed on those platforms, and then you can advertise yourself and your advertising partners to those audiences there. It's like it's like a wonderful path forward for both monetization and for engagement. And the same is true for advertisers. The last thing I want to point out here is this contextual advertising line. So one of the things I read recently that just blew my mind, in good and bad ways, was a blog post that a B2B marketer had written about their decision as a company to just stop using third-party cookies. They did it almost a year ago, and then they spent about 9 months trying to figure out, like, what's changing, how do we need to market now, what do we need to do to support our marketing and our sales business. And they were very much a smart performance marketing shop. And one of the big ahas that they had that they wrote up in this blog post was that, hey, we sell technology solutions, and publishers that write for technologists have context. They have the audience we want. And I'm like, yeah, yes, they do. Absolutely. So contextual, it's meaningful again. It's not just about chasing audiences across the web who have visited your site using technology means, third-party cookie-enabled means. It's about finding the places where you're going to have the greatest connection with your product and service. And that makes publishers relevant. All right, so just kind of flatly saying this is the big impact on marketers in terms of the third-party cookie. This is a really important point. Everybody talks about it as if it's a thing that's happening in the future. Cookies are deprecating in the future. It's happening now. Only about 30% of web traffic is actually targetable through third-party cookies right now. And that's because of all the stuff we just talked about, what Safari and Firefox have done, what Apple has done, what ad blockers do. So, the ability for third-party cookies to really support your business now is really low. Ad retargeting, that classic stalking banner that's following you across the web with those shoes that you looked at, that's obliterated. The feedback loop that happens with the social platforms, that also is blocked. the ad networks are fundamentally changed. Now they're very concerned about how to use data, first-party data, to connect with audiences, to allow advertisers to connect with their audiences. And then third-party audiences, this whole infrastructure, the I speak Chinese and I've got a baby at home, like that is also obliterated. So there's a lot of impact on marketers. Fundamentally, a lot of the tricks and things that they've relied on for a very long time are just going to be gone. I think this is a really important sort of additional point about how prepared marketers really are and kind of where we're coming from a mindset perspective. So we all know that EU and the UK have been under extremely strict data privacy legislation for a very long time, stricter than what we have in the US. And what this is saying is that, we've got the US, the UK, and the EU in these three groupings. And green means we are significantly increasing our investments. Yellow means we're increasing our investments. And red means we're just maintaining, we're just doing what we're doing. And UK and EU overwhelmingly are saying we are investing, and we consider it a really important thing. More respondents are saying it's an important thing for us to invest in than compared to the US. So again, it kind of goes back to like, how seriously are marketers taking this? Like, what are they really doing to prepare? And I go back to what John said, this is a great opportunity for us to step in and really close the gap for them. So this is the point in the presentation where we have our mantra of remembering our power.
Why not? I mean, this is the opportunity. And, anyhow, everyone has heard my soapbox speech on that, but for media, it's time to get that power back and start becoming more engaged ever with our clients.
Yes, 100%. So everything that we've talked about today, what does it really mean for B2B? The legacy of how we have run the business of B2B media since its inception is like, it's our dominance. This business lives on the idea of first-party data, understanding who they are, who people are, what they are to their organization, what companies they come from. All of that, rich history really puts us in the catbird seat now. Context, it's in our DNA. It is who we are. We are bridging, the relationship between buyers and sellers. We are, the influencers within our market segments and the markets that we serve. And content, that really speaks to bringing those buyers and sellers together is absolutely key. And then this is one of the things I talk about a lot, but there's a lot of folks out there talking about intent data. I got to get intent data. I got to find those signals. And very often the vendors of that data are like really using weak signals, like they're calling them from like third-party cookie sources or, from across the web. And publishers have intent data out their ears. It is really, so entrenched in the business that we do. But getting to it is the challenge. First-party data, again, interoperable everywhere. And again, in the B2B space, this is like so entrenched in how we do business. We don't have to go looking for it. We have to build the bridge between our users and engaging with us so that we can get their first-party data, but we don't have to look for it. And then lastly, intelligence is the currency here. It's not about top of funnel lead gen. It's about what you can talk about in terms of who those people are, how they're engaging, what content resonates for them, how do they like to be talked to? And we are just flush with that kind of information if we really want to have it. So we're getting to the very end here, and I know we're at the last minute, but leveraging and monetizing first-party data has requirements. You've got to make sure that we have data infrastructure that's built for this new era of post-cookie.
There you go again.
Well, here I go again, yeah. And when we talk about data infrastructure, what we mean is we've got to bring our data out of its silos. We've got to connect it in meaningful ways. We've got to have it be nimble and available. We have to be able to build insights on top of it. Insights are really, teasing out the really important meaning behind lots and lots of like web events and activities that happen across the ecosystem. So insights are critical. Embracing transparency with your audiences. I hear this a lot. People are like, I don't want to pull back the kimono. I'm scared. I don't want to show my advertisers everything about what's going on in their campaign, or, give them all this detail. But I'm telling you, this is a differentiator for you.
Yeah.
An opportunity to stand apart from your competitors in the way that you provide this intelligence.
By the way, I think that's a great point. And that was always the case in different eras, of B2B. It was always like, let's not tell them how we do this because they'll do it themselves. I don't think that's a problem here at all. In fact, I think to your point, Anne-Marie, to differentiate you, meaning the people on this webinar, from your competitor, show them everything, because if you're doing it, you're in the cutting edge of this stuff. And plus the client is not going to want to build this stuff because they don't do this every day. They just want to push product. So if you have a wide open look at how this whole process, I think customers of the media companies walk away more impressed rather than taking it with them.
Yeah, 100%. This next point is really internally facing. Are we supporting and really delivering our marketing message about the things that we do as media companies in a way that is impactful to our audiences? This isn't time for standard media kits. This is time for us to really stand in the power that we have with first-party data and tell a really compelling story about how we're information companies. Productizing omni-channel, delivering all of that intelligence, investing in audience development, and what I'm going to say is novel content that supports the buyer's journey, not news of the day. Our audience development teams need investment and they need support because people are changing the way that they consume media, the way that they consume content, where traffic comes from is changing. So we have to be able to engage with people in the channels where they're active. And then lastly, and this is actually a topic for our next webinar, it's really about sales team enablement and how do we support sellers with the right information and the right messaging so that they can deliver this to the market. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
If we've got amazing solutions and incredible data, if our sellers can't talk about it meaningfully, then we really don't win.
Yeah, a couple wrap-up points from that, Anne-Marie. The second last point, audience development. Audience development kind of drifted over the last 10 or 15 years. Even 5 or 6 years ago, there was argument about whether there's enough development going on and what's the importance of audience if we're going everything on the web and all that other stuff. For anyone that's in audience development that's on this call, this is once again your day. Developing audiences and finding influences. The technology that's been available and becoming available to do that just made your jobs much more exciting and I think a lot more impactful and positive. So the whole era of audience development is, I think, in a much stronger place today than it was in previous years. And then the final thing, as Anne-Marie pointed out, as a publisher, you spend all this money, you spend all this time, you make the investment, capital expense, you build everything you need, you have the best way of finding audiences, first party data, intent, and all of that. And wouldn't it be a shame that you got to the very end and then the sales team couldn't do it, couldn't understand it, and that whole effort goes right off the cliff. All of that work would be for nothing. So the criticalness of the sales team learning, we say sales team and enablement, but really teaching them how this works and how they can intelligently speak to a client, a customer, and especially an agency, especially a digital agency. And over the years, I've seen nothing sadder than a salesperson who's not technology savvy walking into a digital agency and getting blown right out the door in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. So as Anne-Marie mentioned, the next one is going to take everything we've learned, and then how do we embolden and give confidence to our sales teams to handle this?
100%. Thanks, John. So we at Leverage Lab are part of the First Party Data Tribe, and we would love to give you one of our friendship bracelets that says, I love first party data. So if you want one, drop your physical address in a contact us form on our website or put it in chat. We'd love to send you one. We'll also be at BIMS, so you can come by and get one there, and be part of the First Party Data Tribe. Like, who doesn't want that? All right, Jake.
All right. Well, we got a couple of questions here. So if those want to stick around, see what other people are asking, this is a good chance to ask your questions, but also we'll read some of these off here. First one is, what does the tech stack look like for a media company looking to utilize their first party data in these ways?
That's a fantastic question. So the tech stack can look a lot of different ways. There are numerous different technology paths that you can go down. You can go down a cloud data warehouse first approach. You can go down a standalone solution approach where you're bringing your first party data together in that platform. But the key is that we take the data out of the silos. So where your data is living, that describes how your consumers or your users and your audiences engage with you, has to come out of those silos, and it has to come together and be married to what's happening online. So that takes special technology. And there, like I said, there's different pathways to take to get down to that. But fundamentally, that is where you have to be.
Great. A quick one here. Is there a specific date that this all ends?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, like I said, the door's been closing. It's about 70% closed, let's say, since only 30% of web traffic can be targeted with third-party cookies. But Google is saying that they will deprecate by the end of the year. There's some challenges to that they're going through, a lot of it around some of the solutions that they're trying to offer and how monopolistic they appear. So there's going to be, some tests in court before everything is said and done. But I guess I would encourage people to consider it closed. Think about what how close we really are to it being closed. If we don't have a first party data strategy, if you're still scratching your head on what that looks like, you better get in gear. It's critical at this point.
Amber, I have a quick question, and I know that probably from other people sitting in the webinar, a lot of our business the last several years has come from programmatic. If programmatic has been kind of an easy solution, it may not be the best yield or CPM, but it's there, it's money, and we don't have to work hard for it. Do I lose all of that?
You could lose all of that. I mean, it depends on how you're offering that inventory in programmatic. I mean, programmatic for B2C publishers especially is still viable. And a lot of what people are kind of wrestling with is how do we sort of staff for the direct selling of private marketplace deals? Because if you think of the programmatic ecosystem as an infrastructure as opposed to your selling machine, then you can still use it as an infrastructure, but the onus becomes, how do you sell it to your advertisers? So there's definitely challenges that come with still having programmatic on your sites. But, if you're selling the inventory or you're selling it via a private marketplace, then, it could continue for you.
Great.
Awesome. And then just one last question, which is, how are most publishers relying on third-party cookies right now?
So the only things that I'm seeing that are still problematic are, if you're still relying on sort of anonymous audience retargeting via site retargeting pixels, that are going to be blocked, like that's a challenge. So I think there's still publishers out there who are selling sort of a straight site retargeting solution in the B2B space. There's wonderful opportunity to change that and to create a more data-driven approach to that, much more high value, much more controllable as well from an inventory perspective. So there's definitely, opportunity to change. We've got time. So that's the most prolific thing that I see, that it's still third-party enabled. I think we do see some publishers who are using sort of third-party data sources. We showed a few of the different data vendors when I went through my profile. Relying on some of that data may be a question. So, thinking about how you would replace that is another thing you might take a look at.
Great. I think that wraps it up. So, all right, everyone, thanks for attending the webinar today. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question or you think of some after this, you can always feel free to reach out to us directly on our website. We'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar and a reading list of all the case studies and sources we've cited here to everyone who's registered as well. But also join us next month where we talk about how to elevate your sales game and get your sales team on future-focused advertising strategies centered around first-party data. All right, everyone, thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.